So much for following my channel and watching my demos. Today I'm going to discuss a very important, very famous topic, which is nothing but case statements, right? So if you have used F functions in Excel, and if you've used uh, F else logical functions in other programming languages, such as Python or R, then I would say you're already familiar with case statements. So case statements, in regardless of what tool you're using in SQL, executes SQL codes when certain conditions are met. The case statements goes through conditions and returns a value when the condition is met. So once a condition is met, then it stops reading and returns results. And if the condition is not met, if there's no conditions true, then it returns the value that we input for the else clause. So without any further ado, let's get to a couple of examples, and let me not get you too confused with all these semantics here. Just remember that there are two ways that we can use case expressions or case statements, whatever you want to call it. The first one is the case expressions, and the next one is going to be the general case. So they're different. They both they both achieve the same goal as far as conditions are concerned, but they just have a little bit of different ways of handling conditions, and they also have different levels of scripting. So let me start with the case expression, and I'm going to demonstrate these concepts using the example. So when I'm performing a query, pay very attention, pay detailed attention to what I'm saying in the course of the demonstration, because I'll be explaining what the concepts are as I'm typing these scripts, right? So let's get to it without any further ado. I'm going to start with the case expression. And case expression is, again, I'm not going to define it yet until I have finished writing this SQL script. So what I'm going to do is, before I do anything else, I'm going to show you what the table is from which I'm going to be using the data, or table I'm using for this demo, which is the trade balance table. It has 5 columns: ID, country, exports, imports, and GDP in billion, right? And so this will be our demo table with all these fields that I just mentioned. So what we're going to do now is we're going to perform a case statement from the case expression category, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with saying select. I'm going to say case, and I'm going to put the argument ID, and I'm going to explain it why I'm doing that. So just hold on. And then I'm going to say when, let's say 1001, and so I'll say 1001, then first on the list, right? And let's say I'm going to copy this, okay, and then let's say 1002, then second on the list, right? So the reason I copied that, this is the logic: second on the list, and then when 1003, and these thousands are the IDs here, then third on the list, and then lastly I'm going to put 1004, then fourth on the list. Okay, and then I'm going to say else, okay, uh, else all others. Let's put it that way. And then I'm going to say int, and then I'm going to say this new column is going to be ID, ID description, something like that, right? And once I do that, I'm going to specify what table should take this statement should be done, should be performed on. So I'm going to run this to make sure I'll get a result and there's no problem with this syntax here. And if there is, I'll debug it before I provide you description of what I've done and what's going to happen next. Oh, there you go. So here's what we're doing. I'm going to need to add ID, country, import. I think it's exports and then imports, but let's see. Exports and then imports. Okay. Exports, imports, GDP in billion. All right. And then it's going to be the case ID. Let's go ahead and run this now. Oh, I probably forgot. Oh, I forgot to put the comma here. All right, so let's go ahead and run this. There you go. So as you can see, the case expression, there are a couple things now. The case expression on in a case expression, all you have to do is to declare the name of the column on which you're going to perform case statements, right? And so this is just selection of what column should be shown here. So don't worry about that. Check this out. Case ID. So what we're doing is we're performing an a case statement or if statement, but instead of here mentioning if ID equal to 1000, then this and that, pretty much we are trying to avoid having to add argument and expression here by calling the column name, right? All we have to do is specify the name of the column on which we're going to perform the statement. In this case, it's not it's the ID column. So we say case ID, we say okay, case ID, and then everything else that comes underneath is going to be from the ID, right? 1001, 1002. So all you have to do is now you put the win after you declare the case ID, or after you declare the ID as a case. All you have to do is just put win and the value, and then this. So we say again, you say you put as your case, you put the ID, and then this is where you're going to put the condition. When ID, when ID meaning when 1000 meaning that means when ID is 1001, then give me a label called first on the list because first on the list is ID 1001. And then you say if ID when 1002, then second on the list. This means when ID equals to 1002, then second on the list. And the same thing when 1003, that means when ID is equal to 1003, then third on the list. When 1004, that means when ID is 1004, then fourth on the list. Else, now listen to this. Else, so you're assigning a conditions, right? But then what if what if what if it does not meet the conditions? So we always need to have followed with an else, right? So we say else, then which means otherwise. If it does not meet these conditions, that means if the ID is not equal to one of these conditions, then give me all others. Give me a label, right? Give me a string label that says all others. And then you say end, right? And then you say as ID description. Here you're performing an alias. So you're saying ended, but then make sure that this new column, because remember, you just created a new column here. All of this that you see, the chunk that I'm selecting, is doing nothing but performing an F statement to create this column. And we call it ID description, which is the name of this column ID description. And then lastly, we call out the name of the table on which this operation needs to be performed. So you must be asking why? Why do we need to, instead of saying, when ID is, instead of putting when ID is equal to 1001, then this. Why not that way? The very conventional way that you probably know from like Excel or other programming languages, right? Well, this makes it easy, right? So this makes it easy because you don't have to each time call out the name of the column because here you already specify the column name, right? That field name, whatever you want to call it, which is ID, and then everything else is just conditions. Like think about what if you have let's say thousands of records and you want to assign uh, conditions, right, to those 1000 records. Then are you going to specify the column name in each statement that you open? No. And instead, you can just automate this, right? And then just assign those labels through automation and then just paste it in and run your query. That makes it so easy. That probably trims off like 50% off of your labor work that you're putting into creating a statement to perform an if condition or an if expression. So that's the first way that I just explained to you, which is the expression case, right? Where you express the case first, right? And then you perform the conditions. Again, pay close attention. Select ID, country, export, import, GDP in billion. You're selecting these columns, right? This is just what to show here. And then you say also, you put a comma, that means it's followed by one more, which is this one. And then all of this that you see goes on to create this one column. And all of this is nothing but you specify the ID as a case, right? And then it's like creating a case folder. And inside that folder, you're assigning a bunch of conditions. Now, any condition that you put underneath once you declare the case, any condition that you put under the case will be counted toward that case that you declared. Like let's say if you declare country here, right, as a case, or let's say export, and you run this, you're going to see an error all others because none of these values we just put here meets the export. So since we are saying if it does not meet any of these conditions, it give me all others, it gives all others. And we declared export. But if we declare ID as a case and we run it, you're going to see that we're going to get a result. Oops, sorry. Uh, Case select ID. What did go wrong here? Okay, yeah. And then when you selected ID here, one second, let me run this again. You see that when you declare ID as a case here, you see that everything, the value that meets, you get the results back. First on the list, second on the list, 1001, Afghanistan is first on the list, 1001, then first on the list. 1002 China, second on the list, second on the list. 1003 South Africa, the condition label is third on the list, third on the list. Everything else, all others. Everything else, oh, we also have a fourth on the list. 1004 USA, fourth on the list, fourth on the list. That's the label condition. And then everything else, all others for everything else. Simple as that. Again, you're declaring a column or a field as a case, and then you just put your conditions beneath that. Now let's move on to the second one, which is the general case, right? This is going to be a little bit complicated because you're going to have to specify the field names inside your condition statements. So let's do it. We're going to say now, first of all, let me just rerun this and get everything that belongs to the trade balance table. And we're going to say, let's say we're going to say select, right? We're going to say, let's just bring everything that's here, right? Let's just copy that so we can make use of it, right? So it's going to bring us those five columns, right? Now, this is where it's going to change. We're going to say case, right? And then we enter. Once we enter, we're not going to specify the column name here. You're going to see now. I'm not going to specify it. I'm going to leave it blank. Unlike here, I specified it. I don't specify it here. And then this is where I'm going to, this is in the body of the conditions expressions, I'm going to add in the field names. So I'm going to say when exports, right? When export is greater than, let's say, when export is equal to, and I'm going to use these operators. It's very important for you to pay attention to it. I'm going to say when exports are, um, in fact, let me do not the conditionality between two columns. Let me just do exports. If export is, let's say, between 50 and 100, well, this export this field. Then we're gonna say say good good economy, right? We say stable economy. So label it as stable economy. And then you're gonna see now, I had to specify the name of the column here. Unlike here, where I did not have to specify the name of the column. Just put the conditions as once I declared the field column. Second, I'm going to say when exports are greater than, let's say, 100, then call it very stable economy. So, and then I'm going to say, uh, let's say when, oops, sorry, I forgot. And then it's going to say when, let's say when exports is less than, let's say, 45, right? Well, since we have 50, between 50 and 100 here, then let's just put 50. Then say, then say, not, unstable economy. So we just assign three conditions here for these three values. Else, say, uh, uh, developing state, right? If it does not meet any of these conditions, then just call it developing state. And lastly, let's go into end this, and then let's just call the new column name will be economic status, right? And then lastly, we're going to have to specify the name of the table that this operation should be conducted on. Let's go ahead and run this and make sure it will give me a result. There you go. And as you can see, I have all of these conditionalities, right, for export, which is our column. So first of all, it's a general case. I did not have to specify. I did not have to specify the name of the column. And one of the reasons, this is not good because you're having to add more work, but it's also good because you could actually in here you specify, you declare one column, but everything have to, all the conditions have to relate to that one column. But here you can actually call in multiple columns. In here, I only called in, I only uh, uh, put I only perform conditional statement on exports field, right? But I could also do imports, like in the next column, or maybe on GDP billing, which I'll do in the second in the next example. So now you know that since we did not declare the case, we had to make reference to the column name on each of these conditional statements. Say, and when exports is between 50 and 100, then give me stable economy. So we have a bunch of stable economies. See, 65 China, 80 USA. So Bangladesh 86. These are stable economy because they meet the condition to be between 50 and 100. Now, when export is greater than 100, then give me the label very stable economy. We have a bunch of very, very stable economies. Egypt, India, these are very stable economies, 80, 75. What else? Yeah, those two. Again, this is. I wasn't even paying attention. When I was putting together this fictitious data set. I actually changed it up a couple times, but so don't use this as your world economic indicators reference, you know, reference point or data point to to use for anything. It's just fictitious. Um, yeah, because I don't think Bangladesh, India is Egypt or India are on the top two very stable economies. What else? And then when export is below, I mean, just of course, I think in India is a very highly developed country. It's have a stable economy, but relatively it's lower than U.S. and China, uh, or and maybe Brazil too. But that's relatively speaking. But of course, these countries are all like among the good states with good economic stability. All right, so when exports is below 50, then call it an unstable economy, right? So we have a bunch of unstable economies. Of course, Afghanistan. This I got this right. uh, Unstable economy, South Africa. I got that one wrong. So unstable economy, Mexico. I definitely got that one wrong. Brazil. I definitely got that one wrong. So Germany definitely got that one wrong. So and then if it does not meet any of these conditions, then just call it developing state. So do I have a developing state? Well, apparently uh, all of my conditions meet these references values that I give here. Otherwise, I could have a developing state value here as well. So let's say if I tweak it a little bit, right, and say anything that's between, um, let's say 60. Do we have, yeah, let's say if there's anything between, uh, maybe I do have developing state because there's one country, Mexico. Oh, minus 50, yeah. Let's say, I would say if anything is minus is below, let me see, 30. Let's say 30. Let's say if any country is below, um, let's say 30, right? Let's just say below 30, and let's just put here between, um, yeah, so, okay. Let's run this now. We're going to have at least one country with developing state label. There you go. Um, uh, minus 30. So this is below 30 is 45. I don't know why I have developing state, but it should be between 50 and 100. Um, 30 is an unstable economy, right? So, okay, because it does not meet any of the conditions here, because 45 does not meet the condition of anything here. So, uh, yeah, this is why we, since Afghanistan does not meet the condition of any of them, right? It's or even Brazil, or it's 30, and Afghanistan, they do not meet the condition of being between 50 and 100, or being above 100, or being below 30, because they're in that range of 45 and 30. They're not they are now getting the else condition, which is developing state. So all I'm trying to do here is just to show you how, when these conditions on your given on your given values, on your given arguments, is not met, then the statement goes to read the else, and and bring what you have as the criteria for your else, which is developing state. And then lastly, you end it, and then you call it as the economic status. Uh, uh, co- uh, uh, you end it, and then you call it, with the alias of economic status, which is this column which you just created. And that's pretty much it when you perform a general case statement for performing condition. Now let me go to a second example, right? As I told you earlier, I'm going to have another example where I will make a little bit of tweak with the name of by using multiple columns, right? So this one is going to be pretty much the same as that one. The previous one, I need to bring these columns at least here. I'm going to make my job easy by copying and pasting there, and then I'm going to start by saying case now. Same as the one before it, I'm not going to declare the name of the column or field that I'll be performing these conditions on. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by saying when. Now I'm going to say when exports, right? I'm going to now use two columns now. When exports is equal to, right, imports, meaning like these two numbers are equal to each other, then say same, then say equal economies, something like that. And then let's say when, now I'm gonna use now this time imports. That's the benefit of using a general case statement, that you can actually add as many columns as you want, as many conditionalities you want. While in express condition, you have to, yeah, all your condition have to be from that case that you declare. We say if import. Now I'm gonna say if import was, let's say, greater than, um, let's say if import was greater than export, right? Export, and we're going to say, if a country has greater export than its import, then we say that country has trade surplus, right? I'm going to just put surplus with SPLS. And then I'm going to put another one this time. I'm going to say export, right? If export is, let's say, greater than imports, uh, hold on. If imports is greater than export, it's not trade surplus, it's trade deficit, right? So I'm put DVCT. And then I'm going to say if export is now, this time I'm going to say if export is greater than imports, right? Then I'm going to call it what? Trade surplus. So as you can see, I assigned three conditions, right? If export and import of two countries equal to each other, we say equal economies, right? And then if import is greater than export, then we call it trade deficit. And if export is greater than imports, we call it trade surplus. And then else, right? If it doesn't, if these conditions do not meet anything on these two fields or any of the given fields here, then just simply give me something as you can say give me if it does not meet that, then say uh, uh, countries countries uh, under review, something like that. Or in fact, just call it states under reviews. Under review. That means we still need to get the data for them or need to do more research on them. And then end it, just like you, oops, and then end it. And then also make sure that you add the new alias name. Maybe this time you can say uh, 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 trade balance, right? Trade balance, trade balance status, something like that, or position or status of it, I think. And then lastly, go ahead and specify the name that uh, this case expression or statement query should be performed on. So let me go ahead and run this to make sure this works, and it did work. So as you can see, we have a bunch of countries that are in trade deficit, right? Meaning that their exports, meaning that their imports, that means they import more than they can or export their items, in terms of goods and services. Their import of goods and services is higher than the export. Then we have some countries who are trade surplus, right? Like Bangladesh, Mexico. Let's just again, let's just not worry about these countries' names, and again, it's fiction. So then we also have a bunch of countries that are trade surplus, right? That have meaning they have higher export than their imports. Like India, they have a 120 coefficient, measurement, 120 value, and for import they have 76 value. So that means this is lower than the import is lower than the export. Same thing with Bangladesh, same thing with Mexico, exporting more than they're importing. Brazil exporting more than they're importing. Indonesia exporting more than importing. And then Germany is in trade deficit because it's exporting less than importing. So we don't have any, all of our conditionalities are met. So you see that there's no states under review, right? That's either greater than or smaller than each other, or they're equal to each other. So since none of those conditionalities are outside the scope of our data, therefore we don't have the states under review. Unlike the ones we did earlier, the two year, we did have some countries or some data values that did not meet these given conditions, and then we also had the else value pop in our result, or in both cases. But here we do not have, we all of our conditions are met, so we do not have the else result here. Now lastly, I'm going to show you how you can actually expand on your case statements, right, by performing aggregation. Let's say, and this is just going to be one very basic example to lay the foundation for you to be able to perform additional such functions on your own, for you to enable you to think outside the box, right? And work through your data to see how you can actually expand and build much more complex queries using case statements. So this one is going to be select, and I'm going to say select. I'm not going to specify the column name, but I'll show you why I'm not going to do it in a second. I'm not going to start with the sum yet too either. I'm going to start with the case, right? And then I'll come back. So I'm going to start with the case and say when GDP, right? Let's say this time I'm going to use the GDP in billions, right? Maybe I should have used this for everything else, but when GDP, right? When GDP in billion, right? When GDP in billion is greater than, right? Let's say when GDP in billion is greater than, let's say what could be a good number. Let's say maybe uh, maybe 70, right? Then give it a one number. right? Otherwise, so remember, otherwise, give it a 0. Simple as that. So here, remember here, our conditional result, right? The assign that we assigned were strings, like the labels. Here, our result is numbers. So it doesn't always have to be string. You can also have, a conditional result such as number or anything else. And then lastly, we're going to say int as, let's say, result dichotomy, right? Uh, dichotomous, I mean, like, maybe I should put dichotomous result or dichotomy result for GDP, right? And then lastly, I'm going to call in the name of the table that this should happen on, that this should be performed on. So let's go ahead and run this to make sure that there's no problem with it. And if there is, we need to debug it. There you go. As you can see, all right, you know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to bring these call field names in there so that I can explain better. But I will have to delete it when I use the aggregation, and I'll explain what the logic is for that. There you go. So based on our conditionality, the countries that have a GDP of, and GDP in billion again, this is just fictitious, have a GDP of that's greater than 70, they have assigned the value 1. So Afghanistan, a high GDP 78, has a 1. China has a, GDP of 65 that's failed it and have 0. And then South Africa has a GDP of 1. USA has GDP of, got a result of 1, greater than 70. Egypt has a 1. India has a 1. Bangladesh has 0. Mexico has 0 because it did not meet the conditionality of being greater than 70. So all these other countries are 0. So now, what am I going to do now? I need to perform, I need to perform an aggregation, right? I need to perform an aggregation. And I've explained the rationale and the concept and the rationale of aggregations and how you can how those play in when you're using SQL, right? Or what are aggregated data, what are discrete data, all those things are cleared in my other videos. Now, because I'm going to perform an aggregation, right? An aggregation operators we have covered, there's many of them, some averages, standard deviation, all of these are aggregation. You're aggregating, you're getting one value. Remember, it's on an aggregation, you're getting one value, right? You're aggregating your result of your calculation into one value. So now, since we're going to perform an aggregation, first thing we need to do is we need to get rid of all these other fields, right? Because we're going to get one result. As a result, we're going to get one value. So if we get one value, how are we going to get one value when we have all these other records? It's going to run into problems unless we group by them. That's a different thing. So first thing first, we're going to say, oh, did I get rid of select too? Yeah, I should not get rid of select, only these columns. Select will be there. All I have to do is now add a sum, right? Add a sum, and then what's going to do is the sum is going to go in, right, and perform a sum of this case statement or case operation expression that you just wrote. So you're going to get the sum of the countries that meets the conditionality of being greater than 70, and give it a 1, and sum this 1 for you. And then also sum whatever you have for the else parameter. And then lastly, it's going to give you the result back in this dichotomous dichotomy result GDP, which is this column. So again, when you run this, you're going to see it's better to explain it once we have the data. There are 5 countries, right? There are 5 countries that actually meet this condition, meaning there are 5 countries who have a GDP of $70 billion or that have greater than $70 billion GDP. That's the result right here. Now, if we were to go back, right, and look at this, you're gonna see that there are 5 countries one, two, three, four, five. Five countries that have uh, that got the value one for meeting the condition of having greater than 70 billion dollars in the GDP, which is these countries. Now, what we did here is because we perform an aggregation, we got rid of these columns. And let's see, we're going to keep the columns, right? You're going to see what's going to happen. We added the sum, right? And then because we open a parentheses for the sum for this case statements, we're going to end the parentheses. Where we put the end. So let's now run it with the columns there. And there you go. You're going to get a result back. It says trade balance that ID must appear in the group by clause or be used as an aggregate function. So it's telling you that, look, you're aggregating the sum of this condition. And in the meantime, you also want to use the columns. You want to, if you want to use all these fields, these columns, and you want to see the sum next to them, then you need to group them by something, right? And aggregation works with group bys. And again, if you really want to know the aggregations and group bys, please refer to my video titled aggregated functions in SQL. So we need to get rid of those columns now. Now, if we do it once, run it once again, you're going to get a one result back. And that result is, again, the sum of this case statement conditionality we just added here that counts those countries that have 70 billion in GDP indicator, a greater than $70 billion in GDP indicator, who got one. Then whoever did not meet this, got a zero. And the result for that is nothing but five countries that got this result. I'm going to change the economic indicator numbers to something a little bit more realistic for the next videos. Thank you so much for watching this video up until this second. I hope that this has been helpful to you in understanding the concept as well as the practical use of the case statement in PostgreSQL. I look forward to seeing you guys in my other videos. Until then, have a great day.